In the summer of 2002, a demolition crew entered a dead factory complex in Springfield, Vermont. The company that owned it had gone bankrupt that February, and nearly 800,000 square feet of buildings were being cleared out for good. Inside the stripped machine bays, the crew found paper, ledgers dating back to 1896, wartime newsletters, and typed cards listing workers killed in action during World War II. The papers were nearly thrown away. Instead, they ended up at the Smithsonian. This is the story of the company that created them, a firm founded by a department store window dresser, run like a family for 4 generations, and dismantled so completely that its memory nearly disappeared with the trash. To understand how a gear company could end up preserved in a museum, you have to understand the problem it solved. A gear is a toothed wheel that transfers power from one shaft to another. In the 1880s, making gears was slow and imperfect. A machinist would cut one tooth, rotate the blank by hand, cut the next, and repeat. Every step introduced error. Every cutter only approximated the involute curve that a proper gear tooth needs. Fine for simple machinery, dangerous for the machines the modern world was about to demand. The man who solved that problem was Edwin R. Fellows, born in 1865 in Torrington, Connecticut. His father was a school principal and a mathematician, but after his father died, the family's finances collapsed. Fellows left school early and took work in a dry goods store where he stocked shelves, sold clothing, and arranged displays behind glass. His first connection to the machine trade was painting a sign for a machine company. In other words, the future giant of American precision machining began as a window dresser. His mother took in boarders to survive, and one of them was James Hartness, a machinist with uncommon vision. Hartness later hired Fellows to come to Springfield, Vermont, and learn the trade. Springfield was a mill town on the Black River, powered by water and full of machine shops. Hartness had already rescued Jones and Lamson by focusing it on one great product, and that philosophy shaped Fellows' education. Fellows spent days running machines and nights teaching himself gear mathematics, the involutes and cycloids that define how gear teeth must curve if they are to roll smoothly against each other. His breakthrough came when he stopped trying to cut the perfect tooth directly. Instead, he asked a different question. What if the cutter itself was a gear? If a hardened gear-shaped cutter rotated in sync with the blank while moving like a chisel, it could generate the mating tooth automatically. No indexing errors, no template approximations. The mathematics would be built into the tool. The experts said it would not work, and for a time they mocked the idea. Hartness did not. His doctrine was simple. When one of his men had a product-sized idea, he gave him a company. In 1896, with backing from Hartness and a Springfield industrialist named William Wilson, the Fellows Gear Shaper Company was incorporated. Fellows was 31 and became manager. The first machine was built before the company had a real factory. A prototype gear shaper was made in Massachusetts, then the first production machine shipped in 1897. That same year, Fellows received a U.S. patent for the gear shaping machine, and soon after the Franklin Institute honored him with the John Scott Medal. The window dresser now had a patent and a company. What he did not yet have was a large business. The early books showed losses. The market for gear shapers was still tiny because the concept was unfamiliar. But the automobile changed everything. A car transmission is a box of gears, and those gears have to mesh smoothly thousands of times a minute. Hand-indexed gears could not keep up with the demands of mass production. Fellows' machines could. Automotive buyers arrived early, including electric vehicle makers and then the big names of the era: Packard, Oldsmobile, Cadillac, Buick. In 1902, the company built a larger machine for automobile gears, and in 1903, it adapted the shaper for helical gears, which ran quieter and stronger. That move into automobile production was decisive because it matched the machine to the industrial age. Fellows did not need to convince the world that gears mattered. The automobile did that for them. Once the company could cut cleaner, stronger, quieter gears than anyone else, the market came looking for it. The firm's reputation grew from a narrow craft specialty into something much larger, the backbone of precision manufacturing. The business turned profitable and never looked back. Historian Joseph Wickham Rowe later wrote that the Fellows gear shaper became one of the most important tools in automobile manufacturing. As the American car industry doubled, Fellows machines were cutting the teeth behind it. By 1911, the company was shipping more than a third of its production overseas, selling advanced precision machinery to Europe from a Vermont town. The student was now selling to the teacher. World War I and then World War II expanded the company further. Wartime demand for armaments, aircraft parts, radio components, radar systems, and fire control mechanisms made precision machining more valuable than ever. Fellows machines were used for optical housings, bomb sight parts, pistol components, propeller shafts, aircraft engine crankshafts, and tiny gears for instruments and fuses. The company's lines spanned enormous gears and tiny ones. If a gear existed, Fellows built the machine that cut it and the machine that measured it. That last part mattered. Fellows also built instruments to inspect gears, including an involute measuring machine that could verify whether a finished tooth truly matched the curve it was supposed to have. Anyone can claim precision. Fellows built the tools that made precision measurable. By 1924, the company employed about 700 men and could make 100 gear shapers and 4,000 cutters every month. In 1927, the Black River flooded and the factory was submerged under 8 feet of water. The plant dug itself out and kept going. Then the Great Depression hit. Hundreds of Vermont manufacturers went under. Fellows survived by exporting even to the Soviet Union and Japan. The interwar years also hardened the company's identity. It was no longer just a machine builder in a mill town. It had become a reference point for how gears should be made, checked, and trusted. That mattered in an industry where one bad tooth could ruin an entire transmission or engine assembly. Fellows sold confidence as much as steel. Edwin Fellows died in 1945, just days after Germany surrendered. By then, the company was at the height of its powers. In the post-war years, it remained a family firm in every meaningful sense. A massive rotary gear shaper arrived in 1947. Ted Miller, who had joined as an apprentice in 1898, became president, and Fellows' own son took a senior role. Springfield itself revolved around the factory. Machinists could walk to work, buy a house on their wages, and expect their sons to follow them through the same gate. The whole town was built on the assumption that the company would last forever. That post-war moment was the company's high watermark. Demand from aviation, defense, and general manufacturing kept the books full, and the factory floor still looked like the center of a self-contained world. Apprentices learned the craft from older machinists, and technical knowledge moved from one generation to the next without interruption. In a place like Springfield, the company was not just an employer, it was the local institution around which life organized itself. The Cold War kept the orders coming. In the 1950s, Fellows even studied how to resume production after a nuclear war. Later, Colt work passed through the plant as another war cycle came and went. But beneath the prosperity, a different question was building. Who did the company belong to? For decades, Fellows had operated without a union, relying on profit sharing, Christmas bonuses, pensions, insurance, merit wages, annual reviews, and paternalism. While the family still ran the business, many workers accepted the bargain. No union card, but a belief that the people upstairs knew their names. That bargain broke when the family era ended. In 1963, Edwin R. Fellows II stepped aside, and John Barbier, an outsider from Ford, took over. Workers said the atmosphere changed, grievances were stalled, and the paternal feeling vanished. Wages tell the story. By 1968, Fellows workers earned far less than unionized machinists across town. A long-service employee retired on a tiny monthly pension. The old deal had become expensive loyalty. The numbers exposed the weakness of paternalism. When the company felt like a family, workers accepted lower pay in exchange for stability and identity. Once management became distant, that emotional bargain stopped mattering. A machinist could no longer depend on being heard, and the wage gap became impossible to ignore. Union organizing finally succeeded in 1968 after years of failed drives. The workers voted to join the UE, and a neighboring strike soon followed. Fellows delayed its own first contract negotiations, hoping the strike would collapse in the winter. It did not. The workers held through the snow and won. In 1969, Fellows signed its first union contract. The company was no longer a family in the old sense. It was a company. Soon after, the real threat appeared. Technology change and ownership change together. In 1970, the firm renamed itself Fellows Corporation. In 1974, it was acquired by Ma Corporation, a Connecticut conglomerate. By then, the founding families across American machine tools were aging out or selling. Control passed to owners with no roots in the town and no special reason to care where the machines were built. What killed Fellows in the end was not just labor and not just conglomerate ownership. It was CNC. Through the 1970s and 1980s, Japanese and German builders, backed by coordinated national investment, poured money into computer numerical control. CNC did not merely make machines faster. It moved intelligence from the machinist into the program, which let younger factories anywhere in the world match work that had taken Springfield generations to master. Fellows responded with Hydra-stroke machines and then its own CNC models, but the response came late and under managers focused on quarterly numbers instead of long product cycles. At the same time, the American machine tool industry as a whole was hollowing out around it. That shift was bigger than one company. The old advantage of American firms had been accumulated shop floor skill and a deep culture of machine know-how. CNC made that advantage portable. Once the knowledge lived in software and not just in the hands of veteran machinists, a new competitor could catch up much faster. Fellows could still make a superb machine, but the market no longer rewarded perfection the way it once had. In 1987, Fellows was sold again, this time to Goldman Industrial Group, a Massachusetts holding company. The pattern was extractive rather than developmental. Engineering staff thinned, products aged, and the company lived increasingly off rebuilds and spare parts. The active shop floor was feeding the legacy of its own past. That is a hard way for a technology company to survive, and it does not last long. On February 13, 2002, Goldman Industrial Group filed for bankruptcy, and Fellows was taken down with it. The filing shuttered the company's old Springfield neighbors as well. More than 790,000 square feet of manufacturing space in town went dark. After 106 years, the original Fellows Gear Shaper Company ceased to exist. That is where the demolition crew comes in. They were an environmental firm working in the abandoned plant when they found the ledgers, newsletters, and cards of the war dead. Those papers preserved the memory of the firm, the annual losses that turned into automobile production, the weekly shop floor life, the names of men who never came back from war. The bank that held the property later donated the archive to the Smithsonian. The company's paper trail survived because someone stopped before throwing it away. The machines themselves did not die as easily. In July 2002, a Rockford, Illinois company bought the Fellows machine tool assets. The designs, prints, and name were preserved, and a separate firm took over the gear cutter business. Engineers from the Springfield works continued to support Fellows gear shapers. They still do, marketing them under the Fellows name more than a century after the first prototype. Springfield itself tried to adapt. Parts of the downtown complex were redeveloped into offices, clinics, and light industry. The newer plant was repurposed for another manufacturer. But the long decline of the town was unavoidable. Cleanup of old industrial sites, a federal Superfund landfill, and the loss of manufacturing jobs all marked the same thing: the end of the machine shop world that had made Springfield wealthy. The town's decline was not just economic. It changed the rhythm of daily life. The walk-to-work neighborhood, the steady apprenticeship pipeline, the expectation that a son would follow his father through the same gate, all of it depended on a large factory standing in the same place for decades. Once that anchor was gone, the surrounding institutions lost their gravity too. The final lesson is brutally simple. A man with little formal education outthought an entire industry because he asked a better question and because someone at the right dinner table took him seriously. The company he built ran for 3 generations on a bargain older than the union movement: loyalty in exchange for belonging. Once that bargain was priced in cents per hour, it broke. The people who followed treated a century of accumulated skill as a line item on a balance sheet, and the skill scattered in a few years. But the gears Fellows cut are still turning in restored cars, museum aircraft, and machines that outlived the company many times over. The teeth mesh perfectly. Mesh. They always did. That was the whole point. The paper survives in the Smithsonian. The steel survives in the machines. And the name survives wherever machinists still trust a Fellows tool to hold true.